Okay, so remember last lecture I introduced Kant's formula of universal law. One of these formulations of the categorical imperative, or put it more basically, more simply, one of the ways he thinks that we can figure out what our duties are. Now, I said last time, Kant's first example, making a lying promise, could you will that everyone always did this? No, because if they did, you could not lie to get money because no one would trust you. You could not universalize it because the fact that you might be able to successfully do it depends on the fact that most people, or at least not everybody, tries to do this, right? So you could not will it as a universal law, so it is wrong. You can think of some other cases that fail in much the same way as the lying promise, right? Think about shoplifting. Think about stealing from a store, right? Because you want something. Not a complicated case where you're hungry and maybe you need food or whatever. You just want to steal something because you don't want to pay for it, or maybe it's a thrill to steal, right? Could you will that as a universal law? When I want something from the store and don't want to pay for it, I'll just hide it somewhere and sneak out with it. No, you couldn't, right? Think about if everybody always tried to act on that principle. If it were a universal law, whenever somebody wants something from the store and doesn't feel like paying for it, they will walk out with it. Well, what would stores look like? Every single store in the world, going out of it would look like getting on an airplane, right? They would x-ray your bags, they would pat you down, or maybe every store would be like this really sketchy gas station I used to live next to, where every single thing was behind glass and you put the money in the little thing that turns around, and they rotate whatever you want back out to you, right? In a world where everybody always tried to shoplift whenever they felt like it, well, stores would make it so that you could not possibly do it. The fact that you can maybe successfully shoplift depends on the fact that people don't always do this. Or riding a train without paying, right? It's terrible. I've lived in Norfolk for a long time. I've never ridden the Tide. I'm guessing the Tide's like this. We live out in Ocean View. There's no train here, right? But, I know in other cities, right, a lot of times you can get on the train, the subway, without paying. If you're in somewhere like New York, you can jump the turnstile. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody do this in New York. I've been in New York a few times. I lived in Chicago for a while. I definitely saw people jump the turnstile in Chicago. In Germany, they don't even have turnstiles. It's just like they will trust you to pay. And then maybe every 10th time the train's going, people will come through and check tickets and give you a big old fine if you don't have a ticket, right? But you think to yourself, it's like, okay, I want to ride the train. I don't want to pay for it. Could I will that everyone do this? No, right? In a world where everybody tried to ride the subway without paying, they would make darn sure you couldn't do that. They would have those like full body height turnstile guards that you see, like I think DC has these. Or they would check every single ride to make sure you had a ticket, or maybe they would do both. Or maybe there just wouldn't be a train because nobody would finance it. But however it, cashes out, however this looks, in a world where everybody tries to ride the train without paying, you could not do it successfully. The fact that you could do it, possibly, depends on the fact that not everybody does. It fails the formula of universal law, then. Final example, cheating on a test. What would happen if every single person always tried to cheat on a test? Well, then every room, you'd have to give up your phone when you walked in. Professor would be walking around looking at every test. They'd probably have a camera there recording you so they could check the tape, right? Or if everybody cheated, maybe grades just wouldn't mean anything. Either way, in a world where everybody always tried to cheat, the cheater couldn't get what he or she wanted, which is a good grade that actually means something, because either grades would be meaningless, or more likely they would just make darn sure that nobody could cheat and get away with it. The fact that some people can cheat successfully now depends on the fact that not everyone does it. All of these cases and the lying promise case fail the formula of universal law in a very specific way. They fail what people call the contradiction in conception test. You cannot even imagine a world where everybody successfully acted on your maxim. The very fact that you might be able to act successfully on your maxim depends on the fact that not everybody does this. In a world where everybody did try to do it, you would be guaranteed to fail, so you could not universalize the principle. There is another way that principles can fail the formula of universal law, and that's what Kant calls the contradiction in willing. And the contradiction of willing means that you could imagine a world where everybody successfully acts on the maxim, but nobody would actually want for everybody to act on the maxim. You could imagine everybody always doing this. You wouldn't want to live in a world like that. Let me give you guys a few examples. Take someone drowning in shallow water. If I don't want to help them, hopefully I wouldn't think about this, just help them. But if somebody's drowning in shallow water and all I have to do is throw in a life preserver with a rope attached, and they can come, maybe not drowning in shallow water, but drowning, and I can easily save them with absolutely no risk to myself, right? If I didn't help them, my maxim, my principle would be something like, I will never help another person, even if they are in deadly danger, and doing so is easy. Now, I can imagine a world where everybody always followed that principle, where people see people drowning or whatever, and they're just like, stinks to be them, right? I could not will that principle as a universal law. I would not want everyone to follow that principle, because human beings are fragile creatures prone to bad luck. There is a very good chance that I will need help sometime, and I would want another person to help me. I would not want to live in a world where everybody follows this principle for a lot of reasons, but beyond all of those, be an ugly, terrible place, beyond everything else, I wouldn't want people to follow this reason because I can easily imagine cases where it would be terrible for me if they did. Another example that fails this contradiction in willing trust, this is one of Kant's too. Imagine an incredibly lazy person. This isn't quite Kant's example, but it's pretty close. Imagine there's an incredibly lazy person. He has talents, he's intelligent, he could work and make a difference, but he has a trust fund and he doesn't need to do anything except sit on the couch, play video games, right? Could you will that everyone is that lazy? Could even the lazy person will that everyone is as lazy as he is? His maxim will be something like, I will do the absolute bare minimum needed to survive. Kant would say that even the lazy man would not will that everybody follow this principle, right? Why not? Well, somebody's got to design the video games, right? If everybody were as lazy as he is, maybe you would have Pong, but you wouldn't have any nice video games, right? If everybody were this lazy, none of his relatives would have made enough money to give him a trust fund. He would not want to live in a world where everybody followed this principle, because his lifestyle depends on the fact not everyone does, right? So, this is another way that something can fail this contradiction willing test. You can imagine everyone being this lazy, but even the lazy man wouldn't want everybody to actually follow the principle. Okay, hopefully you guys understand how the formula of universal law is supposed to work. Let's go back, though, to two questions that I said any rules-based theory needs to be able to answer. Question 1 needs to be able to answer, how do we know what the rules are? Question 2 needs to be able to tell us why those rules are important. I think the formula of universal law does pretty well with question 1. It's not perfect. I'm going to talk about some possible problems, but it's pretty good with question 1, telling us what the moral rules are, telling us what our duties are, right? I don't know that the formula of universal law tells us why these rules are so important. As far as I can tell, it doesn't, right? If you are standing there, I remember my kindergarten teacher doing this. We were touring an apple orchard, right? And one kid just grabs an apple, starts eating it. Terrible idea, because it's probably got God knows what poison on it. But beyond that, the teacher's like, Billy, or whatever his name was. She's like, don't do that. Would you want everybody to do it? If everybody did that, there wouldn't be any apples. They wouldn't let us tour the orchard. Blah, 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 right? And I remember standing there and thinking, I'm like, well, yeah, I wouldn't want everybody to do it, but why should Billy care that not everybody could do it? Why should that matter if he wants to snag an apple and eat it? No, I wouldn't want everybody to do this, but not everybody is going to try to do it. Why shouldn't I, be able to just snag an apple, right? I mean, this was stupid anyway, they were going to give us apples at the end of the tour anyway. I don't know why he couldn't just hide his apple. But, why? You can think of something you might actually want to steal. Why should you care that not everybody could do it? I don't know that the formula of universal law has a good answer for this. Now, that's not to say that Kant does not have a good answer. I actually think we're going to get much better answers to this kind of question when we talk about the formula of humanity. So that's what we're going to turn to next.